Hello everybody and welcome to Football Manager 2018. This is a potential return video to YouTube as I feel the time to bring my sabbatical to an end is now. It is of course a long time ago since I last recorded a new series for Football Manager. I completely skipped over 2017. I didn't enjoy that game too much, or I wasn't feeling the creative nous that I had in the past. So it meant that FM 2016 was all I've really been doing in the last year and a bit since I decided I had burnt myself out from YouTube and needed the break. And now it could be the opportunity to make a return, but the only way I feel this is justified is if I do something completely silly, unrealistic, and potentially a lot of fun. And my idea, if you wish to give it your seal of approval, my viewers, is to create my own club in a World League database. And before I go any further, I'm just going to say thank you to the creators of this database. They are Black Smog and Ux or Nora. So they helped create it, and it's available to download on the Steam Workshop. I'll be sure to link that below. So I've made my own extra modifications since I've actually been studying how to make some basic changes in the editor, and my solution is to create my own club, which I will call the Hall of Famers United. So I have my own logo ready to go for this, but it hasn't generated, so I'll very quickly bring it up for you now. Pardon me this moment, probably, yeah, so let's see, there you go, Hall of Famers United. There's my custom created crest. I'm pretty happy with it, to be honest, but the main thing I want to do is create the jerseys, because I've had 2 or 3 instances where I created the club and the database crashed, which was rather annoying, to be honest. So I'll be able to create some colour schemes for these jerseys, and we'll have something very interesting for definite. But now we'll go back, and the team I'm going to be replacing in this world database is AEK Athens. I heartily apologise to anybody who is a fan of AEK or Greek football in general, but I felt starting from the middle of the pack is the right way to go. You can see it's the smallest league that is just an individual league rather than groups of 20 in these group A through F or D or whatever. So I think that's the fairest way to go, and I've built the majority of the players, which I will now give you a walk through, but there are a few real life players that I will need to extract from the real clubs and bring them back to my home. So there we are. This is the original list of AEK players that I will be discarding, and then I have my Football Manager legends that I inducted into the Hall of Fame about 3 times in my Football Manager tenure, and I will have plenty to describe in a moment. But let's begin with the star of the show, my greatest player in the history of my time on YouTube, and that is Fusieni Cisse, with certainly some boosted attributes, because I want to win the Diamond League, which is the ultimate prize in this database, and the only way I think I can do it with the same players throughout the entire attempt is to give them some boosted attributes. But for the most part I've tried to keep accurate attributes from my time inducting these players into the Hall of Fame. But Fusieni Cisse, if you remember my Le Mans Odyssey, he was one of the day one delights I described, and he absolutely tore apart the leagues as we ended up winning some big achievements, and he was so valuable to the team. He was a pretty versatile player, but he's the big tall man, and he scored some of the great goals in my time in the Le Mans Odyssey, and he will be leading the line, and he will be granted the captaincy due to his exaggerated 20 leadership. I hope that will certainly go down well. I'm so happy that I'll be able to play with him again, but he is out of the real database, so I had to create him from scratch. So that's a real shame. I hope he's not doing too badly in real life. But anyway, there are plenty more players to talk about, so we'll walk through them in alphabetical order. So I think Andreini is number one. I'd say he is, to be honest. Yes, so Edmar Andreini was my Vasco da Gama goalkeeper for a brief tenure, but it was enough that I would have given him a Hall of Fame place due to his spectacular performances on our way to winning the Copa Libertadores, the Brazilian FA Cup, and I think it was the Rio de Janeiro championship as well. So great goalkeeper. He won't be my first choice, but he was certainly a memorable player in my time and would have been a worthy entrant into the Hall of Fame. We'll move on next to Brian Boring, who was a Chesterfield of Dreams player in FM 2015, and he wasn't the greatest signing I ever had, but he was definitely on the road to legendary status, as he was a pickup for a pretty good bargain. He was very, very talented. He had huge potential, didn't quite reach it, but he was a fabulous player. And I've been very accurate with some of these other stats, such as the nation and clubs trained at, his place of birth, etc., etc. Not to leave out Andreini, of course, but I'll be making many more edits if the save is indeed popular and we progress. But anyway, at only 20 years old, I've tried again to be as accurate as possible. He should be a player to look forward to in the future. But yeah, you can see some fabulous stats even for such a young player in the FM 2015 save. We'll move on next to another Senegalese, Alouine Diawara, who was an immense talent who came from the youth academy at Le Mans FC. He put in some sterling performances. It was very, very rare to see him perform below 6.9. He was often hitting 8.0s on a weekly basis, and that was certainly why I added him into the Hall of Fame. And he could even become an even better player with the potential rankings I've given most of these guys. Du Shuang, you remember, was probably one of the hottest talents that ever came out of the Le Mans FC Youth Academy, but he saw pastures new at Juventus, so he broke contract with he broke ranks with me. He decided to play for Juventus, and I bought him back at a loss. So it's kind of a Paul Pogba situation here, but the part Frenchman who obviously gained citizenship, born in China, and he made a fabulous impact, and he helped us reach the Champions League final with one of those famous assists that he was capable of. It was a great run, if you remember that goal of goals by Ratko Jovicic. Next on the list is another FM 13 player, Jose Eddie Carlos, that I bought for a bargain price as I was entering a reputable position in Ligue 1. He was a very, very handy player, loved to win the ball back with his 14 tackling, very, very strong as well, and he was there for pretty much a decade. So if I had have had testimonials, he would have been one of the very few that wasn't a Youth Academy graduate or a Day One Delight that had earned that legendary status at Le Mans. He would have been a huge player for us, and he would have been rightfully granted a testimonial match. Next on the list is Boris Germain, Diawara's faithful partner on the other side of the centre, and he was a similarly talented player, perhaps more gifted in the pure defensive tactical play, but he was so handy, and he made a valuable asset at the back, just like Diawara, and also came from that youth academy that was so special to me. And then a purchase from Holland was Jamal Hoogland, FM 15 player, of course. He was bought from, I think it was Roda JC, and he certainly had that pedigree to take the Premier League by storm. Didn't really win many trophies at Chesterfield, if I recall, just the FA Cup after reaching the Premier League. It was a very tough slog, but I had a lot of fun, and Jamal Hoogland is a player I'm really looking forward to play with again. Ji Ming Hao, my only player from Shenzhou that will be joining the fray. He was the most gifted player, I thought, that was still loyal to the club after I left, because Peng Chang-ming went on to pastures new, and I think I had the right winger as well. He was also really talented, but decided to go. But it is pretty mad that I've managed to pull more Chinese legends from my saves than I could possibly imagine. But he was a great player, and I hope that we can find some room for him in the team, because the centre midfield area is going to be the most difficult to fill consistently because I've so many. But we'll see how it goes. Then here we go, more legendary status with Ratko Jovicic, the Frenchman who had Serbian roots and he decided to play for that country, but he was most famously known for the goal that burst my vocal cords into mush, and it helped me reach the Champions League final after being 2-0 down in the first leg. He got that all-important third goal, and he made me so proud as a youth academy graduate. But he was sorely underrated by the game. When I inputted his original stats into the editor, it said he'd have about 130 current ability out of 200, and I'm aiming for about 150 current ability throughout the team. So it was pretty shocking to see he was so lowly ranked, but we'll sort that out now as he enters my Hall of Famers United. Nolan Lambert, he could have been my best ever player if I had have stuck around with the Le Mans Odyssey for longer than I did. He was injured when I was scheduled to play that Champions League final on the week. He pulled up with an injury. I had to allow my other goalkeeper, Quentin Bernardo, to play, and we ended up losing 1-0. So maybe in a different universe, I would have won that 100th episode and ended the series with the Champions League victory, which would have been, justifiable in my opinion. But Nolan Lambert could possibly grow into a number one goalkeeper before you know it. Next up on the list is Jordan Martin, who was probably the first player that came out of my youth academy that made me think, oh, I could be onto something here. And for a couple of years, he was so dependable. He was a flair midfielder, but I preferred him as a ball-winning midfielder, as that was my way of thinking back then. But I've certainly grown as a manager, and I could use him in all different ways now. Whereas back in FM13, I had a debt problem, most famously, and I decided to alleviate that problem for a little bit. I'd sell him to Arsenal for about 45 million euros, which was a lot of money even back then, and he was an exceptional player, and I'll hope to make amends with him. He will never leave the club again, I hope, and we'll certainly see what he's capable of in that stacked centre midfield area. Next on the list is another Cam. It's Vanya Machulyan, who played with me at Bursaspor on FM14 as part of my trophy tour that took me around several European countries. And what was great about him was his ability to get forward, score goals, assist, and do all sorts of great damage to the teams that were certainly bigger but not necessarily better than us in Turkey. So I hope that they're somewhere in the team for him, because when I left Bursaspor to go to Wolfsburg, he was dropped unceremoniously by my successor, and then eventually he was told, okay, I apologize, I shouldn't have done that to you, we will sort you out as soon as possible, and we'll certainly avoid those kind of problems. Next on the list is probably the second best player I've ever had in terms of pure raw impact in a top division. It's Jairo Mesa, El Capitan Mesa Grande, as I like to call him. Such a magnificent player that I picked up while looking up similar players to Lee Griffiths. I found him. He was less than 2 million euros, I remember. He came from, I think, was Sporting Gijon, as he was born there, and I picked him up for very cheap, and he scored near enough 20 goals every time in the Premier League for about 5 seasons. And even when I was starting to come about 4th, 5th, he was still banging in goals for fun. And I say, on my hopeful ascension to the top of the World Division, we will be seeing 20 goals a season from him again, as long as I'll have room for him in the team. But he's certainly got some amazing stats, and I hope he'll grow with that remaining potential that I've assigned to him. Next on the list, Cyril Michaud, 24 years old. Perhaps he was the least attention grabbing of all my legends, but he was there, willing and able for me every week in, week out that he played, and I've given him slightly boosted potential and the ability to play on the left hand side, as even though he was a assigned the striker role as his favourite. I've decided I think I could use him a lot better as a left winger that can cut inside on a stronger right foot and cause serious damage. Now, Ronnie Pinho scored one of the all-time great goals, not in terms of a moment, but actually in terms of style, of unbelievable bravery, and just hit and hope. But it went absolutely perfectly off his right foot into the top corner. That was, of course, against Marseille to get me into the Champions League with Chesterfield for the very first time. The former Manchester United man was picked up on a free transfer, and even though he was perhaps pushed out of the team in a very competitive side, he could prove to be very versatile for me, as he loves playing the centre midfield role, but could go centre back if there is an issue in our defensive role. But as I say, Ronnie Pinho, one of those great box-to-box players. He could do it all. Hope to see it again in a more modern Football Manager title. And another Englishman is next. Frank Reeves can play anywhere in the back line, but we'll keep him in the centre if necessary, as that was where he excelled. He used to play for Burnley. I picked him up because they were struggling in the Championship, and that proved to be an exceptional buy. He was absolutely brilliant, and he should have been capped more often for the English team. It didn't come to fruition, and we will certainly see more of him now in this save, because the centre-back role could be very, very vulnerable to competition. There are only so many centre-backs that I gave legendary status to, and he could certainly be my number one pick if he is determined. Next up is David Shanahan, whom I purchased off Chelsea because Brian Lenihan was starting to get old. I needed someone who could fill in long term, and Shanahan could be my number one right back from day one here at Hall of Famers United. He was born in England, but he decided to declare for Wales, and that was a great decision because they played him every time they could. He was one of the first names on the team sheet, and you can see why with some of these amazing stats. And he could play centre back as well if necessary. You can see some very, very incredible stats for him. Another Chesterfield of Dreams player is Erasmus Stephenson, who would have gotten a perfect link to Brian Boring if this was Ultimate Team. But anyway, he was a player that I picked up from Aston Villa when I needed a bit of certainty heading into difficult games in the Premier League, and he came up trumps. But again, he was a matter of debate as he started to get older, and my money grew so I could buy other great players, and he's certainly a fabulous pickup, and he can be used wisely in this database. And next up we have Brian Wheeler, a player who got away from me, but he made an enormous impact on Bursaspor when I almost won the Turkish Super League. But he was a bit of a certainly a moaner because he knew he had greater potential than what he had in Turkey. But my previous manager in Turkey, he bought him, put him in the youth team. I saw that he looked incredible, and that proved to be a valuable decision. But it was so tricky to keep him happy, and maybe in this alternate universe we can keep him happy, and we'll pair him up with some of my favourite players ever seen. And then another FM14 player that I only really got to use once or twice because he was so young, but he was about to break in to the Wolfsburg team, Kai Wisniewski. He is definitely one I'm looking forward to play with. He was absolutely brilliant in his time. He helped me win the DFB Pokal, or the German FA Cup as you might like to know it. But he was a youth academy graduate at Wolfsburg, and the potential he had was insane. He was going to be a superstar, but I had to give up that save as FM15 was around the corner by the time I finished up. Now, if you remember my very first Hall of Fame, I gave some places to players that you would not have seen because I wasn't playing FM 2011. Like, God almighty, the years have gone fast. But anyway, I was playing FM 2011 personally, and I was Shelburne FC in the Irish Electricity League. As you can see, I've given him Arsenal as his club trained at and Shelburne as his favoured club, and he was absolutely unbelievable for me in the Electricity League. We should have been an Invincibles team, but he helped us along the way to a Champions League title by changing history. He was about to go to Sunderland in the FM 11 save, but now we've changed history again. He will be with me at the Football Manager Hall of Famers United, and I can't wait to see where we can play him, because he's one of those few attacking midfielder players that can play anywhere on the wings, and that could be huge. And perhaps the very best regen I ever picked up on Football Manager was Zhang Suesi, who was sold by a Chinese club to Le Mans FC, and I cannot really express how good this guy was. He was the captain of Le Mans FC for a few years. He absolutely destroyed his opponents laid before him. He was a bit injury prone, so I expect, because the way I set this up, he will be injury prone again. But when he played out of his skin. He was simply outstanding. Like, I cannot describe how good he was. Just a fabulous player, and he could be the vice captain heading into this database. But I'm fairly sure, as long as we keep him happy for the next decade, that I'm possibly going to play the save as. It's just going to be a bit of fun for a couple of years because I don't have as much free time. But anyway, if he is going to star, then you will certainly know why he was such a valuable player to me. And then there are a few more players as well we're going to add into the club to make things extra interesting, especially for competition. We have Quentin Bernardo. We can bring him in from Metz, as of course Le Mans FC in real life had severe financial difficulties. They got cut from Ligue 2 all the way down to the amateur leagues, which is a great shame, but he will be picked up for free. Of course, I'm going to be modifying the Creative Club database, and he'll be brought in. Matteo Bianchetti, perhaps some of my oldest viewers would remember him and were nervous that I wasn't going to pick up any San Marino challenge players, but that is obviously not the case. I'm going to give him boosted attributes. I'm going to stick him into the centre back battle for supremacy, and he's going to be such a good player. I'm going to cure him of that back strain, and we'll start him off fresh. We have Shebe Shrivers, who I used to call Shebe Shrivers, but that was the incorrect pronunciation. But he's perhaps a star in real life, but not enough where I would consider leaving him alone at his club. It seems like he's been trained as a centre attacking midfielder, but that was not how I remember him. He was an out-and-out poacher who certainly made a huge impact at League level, scoring 20 goals in his first season, but he was a bit inconsistent, and maybe now we can change how he plays in FM 18 and make him the world star that I know he can be. Someone that got missed out is Ricardo van Gran, one of Just Mike Plays' all-time favourites as well, because of how he played. He's a lot older than everyone else. We won't mind that too much. But he was a free agent in the database. I just had to give him a contract rather than creating him from scratch. But he could certainly pop up and score as a substitute more often than not. Certainly going on a while. We'll try and wrap this up a little bit. But certainly my Pentagon Challenge favourites are making a comeback. And then his fellow pickup, Ntatuko Radaby, he's also been drafted into the under-23s for some silly reason. He was perhaps my favourite player in that entire save, because not only did I play him at Vasco da Gama Cape Town, I also signed him for Shanghai Shenhua, and he was just as good there as he was in his native country, and that was a shoe-in for a Hall of Fame induction if I had have certainly made the effort to induct those players. But certainly I can't wait to see how the left back position goes, because we haven't introduced my favourite left backs yet. Next up on the list is Jonathan Schmid, who was a very, very talented player at Wolfsburg in the FM14, and I'm going to boost him up a little bit, but he will have the reputation, I'd say, to excel above most of my created players. But we'll take him in and see if he can continue the magic that he created at Wolfsburg, but he didn't quite reach that potential in real life, unfortunately. Next up is going to be Gary Roberts. If he can, Gary Roberts, sorry. He was at Chesterfield. He was a fabulous player for them, but I'll certainly be reducing his age by a couple of years to make sure we can use him. But when he was at Chesterfield, he was a highly influential player, but that's why he was taken to Portsmouth by Paul Cook, I think it was, and then he's been taken to Wigan to sell out the twilight of his career, or to sign off the twilight of his career. But he was such a good player for me in Chesterfield, that's why I'm going to take him back. And now, perhaps one of the top 5 great Le Mans FC players, Ali Bamba. He was never the goal-scoring type, but he was extremely versatile at left back. He absolutely loved to defend. He passed the ball well, and would be certainly giving him the boosted stats to reflect how good he was, in my opinion. Anthony Delad, who was the first real... excuse me, that's a bit sloppy, my books. Delad, yeah, so Anthony Delad, who's gone to SC Bastia, and he's still only 25. He was the first real striking partner to Fustiani Cisse, and I'll certainly be picking him up to bring back the good old days. Abdelhakim Omrani is next, if I can spot him up here. And surprisingly, he's gone to Oldham in real life. That was a bit of a turn up for the books. But anyway, I'll be picking him up straight away. He played for me in Sturm Graz as well, if you can remember that save. And I suppose that's kind of a double whammy, as he's one of the few players that have ever signed more than once in Football Manager. Next up will be Yusuf Masakni, who played on the right hand side of the Le Mans FC save. He was lucky enough to be picked, whereas Istvan Orban, I just didn't feel as much of a connection to him as I have with Yusuf. And the Tunisian, I think, will be he will be a contender for a World Cup 2018 place, as I think Tunisia are one of the successful nations to have qualified. I'm certainly going to be very jealous to see them playing and Ireland not, but that's another debate. Next up is Evander, who was a legend of all time in the Football Manager 2016 Pentagon Challenge, but the brief time he played for me, he was still an outstanding player, and he became perhaps the greatest player that the club ever had, as he was there from day one at Vasco da Gama, and he played up until he was about 34 years old. Even when the club was relegated, he still played for them, and I hope to bring some of that legendary status to the club in the Hall of Famers World Database. And now the Irish legends, I put them all together a bit fortuitously. We'll start with Brian Lenihan, who I picked up at Chesterfield. He was, again, like Ali Bamba, he was good at staying back, but he was able to play in a lot of positions, and that could come very handy in this new database. Stephen Kinsella is the only legend I've seen play in real life, as he was signed up by St. Patrick's Athletic last season on loan from Everton. This year he went to Dundalk. A bit of a similar story there, as he didn't get to be picked very often, but these stats, these attributes you see in front of you are totally redundant. I will be changing them to match how good he was on Football Manager. He hit huge potential, scored important goals for me, including the winner against West Bromwich Albion, a scorcher from about 18-20 yards out, and that was so good. Finally, we'll have Sean Kavanagh. He was actually up for transfer in this save with Fulham, and I may as well just say thank you very much, I'll take him. He was the most attacking left back that I ever had that was worthy of a Hall of Fame place, and for about 7 seasons at Chesterfield, he was certainly a delight to watch, got a lot of things done, and we'll see him again in FM 2018. And then 2 more to go in terms of the real life legends that are still in the database. We have Sener Ozbarakli, who was at Bursaspor. He was then picked up in real life by Fenerbahce, and then I'll take him into my club for future reference. He's still only 27, that's great. And then the final one I'd like to reminisce with you is Carlos Exposito, who was a right midfielder at Sturm Graz, and he broke the all-time record for assists in the Austrian Bundesliga, and we'll be modifying him to see if we can recreate that form we saw. But he can also play at right back all the way up to attacking midfielder right, which I will correct in this save as quickly as I can. So there we go. Those will be the entire players that we'll be seeing from day one on this save, and I intend to keep them alive until the end of the so-called experiment, because I just feel the most fun that can be had with a sort of cheesy save where I get to control all sorts of dynamics is to keep the exact same squad from the start and not rely on outside signings, and then maybe give my youth academy a bit of a boost to see what they're capable of. But anyway, to conclude, let's look at where we would like to end up at the end of the save. This is a diamond league with the top 20 clubs in the entire globe. Most of them, of course, are from Europe. What else can be said about that? So the rules to keep an eye out on: we're allowed to play 5 substitutes from 9 named on the bench. We play each other 38 times, perhaps through the majority of the leagues. There'll be big prizes available to the top 10 in this league. For example, you get prize money per victory and per draw and even per defeat. The league sorting rules, as chosen by the creator, is goal difference, and the teams placed 15th to 18th will have to survive in a playoff, whereas the bottom 2 are cut off straight away. That'll be a similar story in the Platinum League, the Gold League, the Silver League, which goes up to 15th. There you can see those teams go down, and then where we'll be starting, there'll be a lot of teams in the Steel League trying to come up the division. So as you can see, there are groups A through D, so they'll all be competing to win promotion. So if you don't finish 8th or better, then you will certainly be punished, and you'll have to survive the hard way via the playoffs, whereas the bottom 4 teams are all cut off straight away. The top 2 go up, and the 3 through 6, just like in the English league pyramid, the football league pyramid I should say, they will all compete to play in the Silver League. And now, before I absolutely forget, there is something for my viewers to get interested in, and that is a position in my backroom staff. If you apply in the comment section below, I will help you out and add you to the database before I consider the save ready to go, if it is approved, of course. But anyway, some of my friends here have already joined in, such as Danny, Matthews, and down here we have Connor, and then a follower on Twitter asked to join me as well by the name of George, so he is joined in. So the bulk of this backroom team, I will cut them off on the day, and I might replace them with my own staff. But if you want to be added in as your own custom character before I begin the game, please let me know as soon as you can. Otherwise, if you'd like to join in future, then I'll probably just look up the free agents and pick a staff member, give them the correct attributes to suit your preferred role, and then I will bring you in. But if you want your own custom character right now, I will use the FM editor and bring you in as soon as possible. But anyway, I've gone on a huge amount of time. Not great if I'm going to be introducing a new save, but anyway, we'll certainly talk about playing games from episode 1, which we can do that for you very, very quickly. We will be talking about the Bronze League, the Cup ties. We'll be playing in the Ruby Championship, the Little Cup, and the Bronze Cup. So we'll talk about them a bit more as the game goes on. But if you don't believe this is a YouTube worthy save, your feedback will be much appreciated. But either way, I will be playing this save either through my Twitter account, like I have been since my sabbatical began, or I will accept the feedback, and I will take this to YouTube, and we'll see how far we can get with my legendary players. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you again very soon. I promise you that. Goodbye.